Please join me in welcoming Jamie Dimon, President and CEO of JP Morgan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I too want to extend a welcome to Mr. Dimon. Welcome back. We're so glad to have you, Duke, once again. And we have a few questions for you that I'll ask, and then we'll open it up after that. But first of all, you've had a pretty interesting career. I've read about it quite a bit, and I'm sure several people have. And I know you've dealt with a lot of different leaders, and we were wondering if there are any particular leaders whose styles you've watched that helped you form your own style of leadership.
There are some. My experience has always been that there are a lot of people you should learn from. So the people, obviously I worked for Sandy Weill for many years. I learned a lot of things to do there. I also learned a few things not to do, because he and I used to argue about quite a bit of things. What he was good at was focus on results, not a lot of BS. He actually didn't delve into details like you're going to need to do to make really intelligent business decisions. Bob Lipp, who's on our board and now is a senior advisor to us, fabulous way of dealing with people. Brilliant guy, but probably the best skills at managing people through and kind of educating them, telling them in a very nice way that they were doing a terrible job and what was expected of them. Bill Harrison, the chairman of the company, has been such a gentleman throughout this whole process of succession. And succession is a terrible thing. But he really is a gentleman and has a sense of maturity, which, believe it or not, there are a lot of people that run companies that are completely immature. So, but the real people, if you ask me honestly, Nelson Mandela, guy, how can you spend 25 or 27 years in jail, tortured and punished, and come out magnanimous? Abe Lincoln. So, there are other people that I would say put on a much higher pedestal than business people.
You've dealt with some pretty interesting people in your life, and I congratulate you on how you and Mr. Harrison seem to be working well together at JP Morgan as well. Another question I had was, I wonder what of your many accomplishments is your most satisfying personal accomplishment?
Well, it wouldn't be business. I have 3 daughters, 20, 18, and 16. One actually goes to Duke. She's not here. She will be in later tonight, but. And I think of all the things you do in life, that is probably the most important thing you do. And so, professionally, there was no one particular thing. You tend to be kind of happy with some of the things you do, but you're always working so damn hard. It's hard to separate one thing from another. I do want, I would tell you that when I look back, I want to have been part of building something that I can look back and say I was proud to be there. And that the people, who were there with me wouldn't come to my grave to, desecrate it. But they come and say, he wasn't that bad a guy, he helped while I was here, and they hand it off to the other generation, they do a good job. So I do want to build, help build something that we're very proud of.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you always seem to have change in your wake everywhere you go, and in a very positive way, and I wonder what your secrets were for accomplishing great changes.
I don't know how much a great change I accomplished. I think that in the business world, one of the hardest things to do, honestly, is, and you've seen in all the cases you've all read, but if people are, and this is hard in total, if you can actually see things for what they are, and not make up crap, if you can actually, and whether it's factual versus anecdotes, analysis versus characterizations. And it's hard, by the way, and it becomes particularly hard when you have people issues. Because, I'm like everybody else. I don't want to have to deal with certain issues all the time. I avoid them. I'm dying to avoid them, because it is so painful to ask someone to leave or make another change or acknowledge that you yourself caused a terrible problem, that now you have to go fix it. So I think acknowledging, seeing the truth for what it is hard. The next hard thing, which to me, I don't know if they can teach this, but it's actually acting on it. The reason people deny stuff is because they don't want to have to do anything. If you walked up to me and said, Jamie, you made a mistake in A, B, and C, and I said, you're right, well, the implication is I'm going to go do something about it. Much easier to say, you don't know, you're not there, you don't know what I know, you don't know the people as well as I do, you don't understand the industry, it's a little more complex than that. You could be dead right. People make these excuses. So, but the ability, this thing about acting, I don't know why, but there is a quality of some people who get stuff done. They are very effective. And there's another whole quality of people, it just doesn't get done. They're very good at analysis. They could be great people, but they don't effectuate change. And sometimes it's like a switch that goes on and off with someone. You go from being a great analyst to all of a sudden you actually can make change. Change causes conflict and problems, and some people never make that break. They can be very good employees, but they can't run a business. They preside over stuff. They don't actually make changes.
Well, I'm curious about the changes that you've already made at JP Morgan and maybe also what your top 2 or 3 priorities are for the coming years.
Yeah, we put together these big companies, so and we had certain commitments to make, like reduce expenses by $3 billion, and these aren't guesses, by the way. And we've closed 40 operating centers, call centers, processing centers, and take in any big corporation, you put together 2 HR departments, you should be able to get rid of half of one. In fact, if you're really good, you get rid of half of both, okay? Because a lot of them just create a lot of damage in their wake, that's the given. That's not the hard part. The hard part is, and I think, is getting a company to have a very disciplined approach to business. JP Morgan didn't really do business reviews. And Bill Harrison was sitting would say, that the discipline of once a month you sit down with some senior people and you go through your numbers. It's not profits. It's new branches, new sales, new hires, turnover, recruits, diversity numbers, facts, issues, what you got done, what you didn't get done, what you brought, and it creates an operating discipline that that some companies have and some don't, and kind of that's job one. So our focus is mostly on management, discipline, balance sheet, getting the reports right, getting our exposures deeply understood. We didn't do enough analysis of some of the exposures we take, and so that's kind of been the main focus, and that is the highest payoff for us. That we have to do that. That's a sine qua non of being a great company, is actually having a great operating company. If we don't operate the place well, all the other future opportunities will never be created. Our stock will never go up. It won't be a place you all want to work. And so that's the most important thing for us to do.
Aside from the corporate goals, I wonder, do you have any personal goal that you put on your to-do list for the new year here?
Yeah, because my second daughter went to college. I have one daughter left at home. I still live in Chicago, which is, I have to commute to New York, which is terrible, but until she finishes high school. So this year I took up guitar. I played before, but I'm thinking to myself, how am I actually going to, when they're all gone, because I do devote a lot of time to the kids when they're around, when I'm around, and like how am I going to, so I love music, so I took up the guitar, I do it every Sunday, and it's amazing how guilty I feel when my instructor comes and he says, so did you finish your things? I say, I didn't actually get to the, I'm 49, I'm the CEO of a major company, and my 30-year-old instructor makes me feel terrible for not doing my homework. But I'm just going to do it and get better, and but not much else than that. I mean, I figure if I do 2 things well the next 10 years, that's all I have to do well: family and business. Those are the only 2 things that are really on my list, and hopefully stay healthy.
On the business side, I'm curious as to how JP Morgan differentiates itself from its top competitors. You're in obviously the super heavyweight league here, and it seems sometimes that all these big banks do everything. But how do you differentiate?
Yeah, I've never been a believer in this financial supermarket, and it's a very simplistic thing. Well, Sandy did, by the way. He wanted this. He wanted to be so big that anything that was reported as immaterial was basically, and the more the better. Whereas there's no logic to have some of these businesses be together. That doesn't mean you can't do it. You may be particularly good at running it. GE does it, and a bunch of other people do it. And there are logics around, I think, to GE's businesses and other people's businesses. In our business, and we've sold about $4 or $5 billion worth of stuff this year and bought $4 or $5 billion. So we put capital in where we will win. The stuff we sold, some are terrible businesses, some we were subscaling, some are, but there are 6. So it's investment banking, to commercial banking, to asset and wealth management, to we call it treasury service, cash management, wiring, transfers, and stuff like that, holding securities as custody, retail and credit card. And you could argue, well, I know I'm not going to argue that an investment bank needs to be associated with a credit card company. I mean, you got to be crazy. And now I do know that the credit card we have 75 million cards, and in retail we got 30 million customers, and all of them have credit cards, and we're going to have rewards programs, and they cross-sell and cross-market. That fits. Now, what you don't know, and it'd be hard for you to know unless you're in the business, that retail and commercial banking fit for the simple fact that show me a commercial bank, this kind of middle market private company commercial banking that doesn't have a retail arm. There isn't one. And the reason for that is the retail branches service these middle market customers with payroll, checks, FX, loans. And so they're directly linked. And the commercial bank is a massive competitive advantage for our investment bank. We did $500 million of equity, M&A, and debt underwriting, so pure investment banking products through our commercial bank. And I think that number could be $1 billion in a couple of years. That's $1 billion. We do $4 billion in fee business, which is about the same as Citi and a little more than the other investment banks in the investment bank. And that's another 500 or 600 million. Think of it as more market share, more clients. So it's a massive competitive advantage for both the investment bank and the commercial bank. And asset and wealth management and cash management basically they provide service to all these businesses. And they sell to all of them, they provide service to all of them, they make good money on all of them.
You've been involved in a lot of mergers and acquisitions and putting these great institutions together. I'm curious, though, what your strategy is for organic growth and your focus on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think organic growth is more important than the other stuff. So you have to run a good business. And maybe you're in a desperate kind of position. Some of these mergers, I always say it's just two drunks holding each other up by leaning against each other at night. And that may be a perfectly valid strategy in certain deals, and it has been. But the real thing of business is to run a good business. If I run a really good business, which includes organic growth, think of it, it'd be silly for me to run a really bad business, then call up someone and say, we don't really do a good job running our business, but we'd love to have a shot running yours. You got to earn the right, and organic growth is not complex. It is a very simple thing. It's more branches, more cars, more innovation, more growth, better service, better product, and we opened 150 branches this year. That's $400 million of capital. We added in the retail system over the last 3 years 5,000 salespeople, and we eliminated 3,000 staff. I call it tooth to tail, combat versus stuff that doesn't create the value out front. We hired people in mortgages. We hired people in asset backs. We did a joint venture with Cazenove, which catapulted us to #1 in the UK. It was a material lift up to investment banking business in continental Europe. And so that's what we do. Every business has to go through their plans, what they're going to do to grow organically. And it's people. We put billions of dollars into systems. So our massive upgrade of systems isn't just because we feel like it. Like right now, if you walk into an old Bank One branch, and we're going to put this, and we're rolling out across the country. When you come in, we open the account. We can open it twice as fast. It automatically will check your name, your stuff, do a credit search, and offer you a credit card in 5 seconds. And so those and prompt the teller saying, by the way, this person is qualified for X. And as you build these things, you give the customer more, better, faster, quicker. The benefit. People should remember the benefit of deals. The only benefit is size if it ends up something better for the customer. It doesn't matter if you're simply bigger. There are some tremendous negatives to being bigger. There's bureaucracy, hubris, arrogance, greed, stupidity, and the worst disease of all, which how many of you work in large corporations? Okay, tell me if you have seen this one. Corporatitis, that the headquarters actually believes it does something. And so how many of you thought the companies you worked at were pretty bureaucratic? Right, that's the disease. And like you go to these companies, when you walk through, there's simple clues. Look at who uses the corporate aircraft. If it's all the staff people, the company's got a problem. And look how many people are sitting around, in all these functions. Go ask the people in the field, what do you feel when the company has a new initiative? I always say it's like when these companies come up with all these initiatives, 360s, Six Sigmas, the people in the field are like, save me. And they're not always right, but they're often right. And so, you got to be very careful about these big corporations and allowing. So, like one of the things we did at JP Morgan is we set up 6 business heads. They run their businesses. I think Steve Black, he's going to come down, I think. So the guy who runs the investment bank will be here. 6 business, they run their businesses. I put back in their units a lot of their ops, systems, finance, and of course all the departments would say, Jamie, it's risk, and we need to centralize stuff, and they had no idea what they were talking about. And you actually get better risk, better controls, better services when people are really responsible. We've reduced the size of corporate. Well, there are no corporate initiatives that get done that don't go through the 7 of us, them 6 and me, so that we can say, do we need this? Do we need that? And it puts a tremendous bite. It's the great thing for me. Puts the pressure on them to perform. Okay, and there are no excuses. There's one set of books. They can't, they can't make excuses about what we did or didn't give them because their plans were designed by them, kind of approved by us. And so that, that to me is the most important thing to do with these companies is keep that bureaucracy out of the joint. And it is a real disease. And in fact, you do a lot of cases. So just look at why did Walmart win and Kmart lost? United lost and Southwest won. GE won and Westinghouse lost. Toyota, General Motors. You can go on and on. We all teach you about strategies and businesses and structural things. In every single business, there were winners and there were losers. And that you spend a little more time analyzing why that happens. And it's usually the work ethic, the passion, the lack of corporatitis, and all a lot of these other, a lot of focus. And when I say corporatitis, part of that is no focus on details. And if you can walk into a corporate headquarters, they have no idea what they sell, and they don't think it's important when a teller calls or what the teller screen looks like or how the teller feels or the teller gets rewarded. So when I went to Bank One, we had our top salespeople, and these are just ways you can identify this stuff. We had our top salespeople from the retail system to a rewards trip in Hawaii, which was my first one. I flew there through the night. They didn't even tell me about it. I asked all the people, how did you get here when I got there? Congratulations. They weren't really sure, which means it's cronyism, by the way. It means that your buddy gets to appoint you as opposed to, did you actually sell more stuff or something like that? But the worst part was there wasn't anyone there from senior management. Not even the people who ran the bank, the retail part of the bank. So it's their top salespeople where you can learn a tremendous amount from, and they don't bother to go. I mean, and you will see that all over the place. All these signs of this disease, and so don't join a company like that. You'll be demoralized, unless you're a bureaucrat, because some of you are natural bureaucrats. You will actually love it. When you have bureaucracy, there's no accountability. You sit around and say, well, what do you think about it? Group decisions are made. No one really knows who made the decision.
I read a quote on your views on customer service, actually, that I think I saw one that said, treat every customer like it's your mother or something. I wonder, is there any truth to that? And if so, how do you treat your mother?
Well, you got the phrase a little. I was going to say you got it a little bit wrong. That was about ethics.
Oh, okay.
That was about treating people like you want to be treated. Tell them, we do a lot of stuff. Don't treat people the way you wouldn't be treated, the way you wouldn't treat your mother, including, look, my mother doesn't buy complex derivatives, okay? But that doesn't mean, what it means is don't lie to her. Because we don't need to be in the business line. But I do think you should treat every customer well. And the best example I always had was, and that's, like when I got to, this is another disease of corporations, okay? Every single, all these complaints come in. So wherever you go, make sure you see the complaints. All the complaints were from the whole executive floor, from all the businesses they were taken out of the mail, put together, and shipped to a complaint department in Arizona.
Right.
Read your own complaints. It'll blow your mind. You'll feel really bad. You will be shocked how you treat your customers. And then you have the pressure to go do something about it. So I made them all start reading their customer complaints. I followed up personally on why this and why, and this dumb stuff you do is just staggering. And so it is a really critical thing. And I wouldn't call myself the best customer service person, but if you called my office, you will be taken care of. We've got top-notch, and their job, the ones who do it for my office, their job is not just to fix that complaint, but also say, hey, this is broken for 10,000 people, and to fix it. So service levels are constantly improving over time.
Let me turn to something of interest to many of our students, which is the job market in investment banking. And first of all, I'm told actually that JP Morgan's made several offers to some of our students, and several of them have accepted as well. So we thank you. We're delighted to have a great company like that picking off our students here. But do you have any advice for students who are still looking for a job, as many people are, and in investment banking, and how they ought to pursue that?
Yeah. I have, I'll give you some advice about the job. It's hard for me to tell you how to pursue it because I think you all know that all the people coming here and, I think it's okay to be a little aggressive and ask and push and fight and, it's a competitive market, but there are jobs out there, and if you don't get them this year, you get them next year. And but I would say the most important things about a job is work for people you respect directly. A lot of people take jobs and they really don't like that group, but they love the company, and it could be a terrible thing. You should like the company too, because the way the place is run will be part of what creates opportunity for you in the future. And don't make that decision, those decisions based upon, the fact that one school is paying, one place is paying $5,000 more than the other. And people, they don't think clearly when it comes to that. Join the place where you really like the people and where you like the kind of the way the company's going to run or the way you think it's going to run. So,
makes a lot of sense. Let me turn to my final question here for you, and then we'll turn it over to the audience and ask, when you were interviewing people for investment banking jobs, I mean, what do you think are the key elements of that you're looking for to be successful in that area?
right. So, have you ever? I don't know if you showed it here. You get this, the interviewing skills. Like there are real interviewing skills. You look at retention. Half is terrible interviewing. And lying to the people what their job is. So, like even when I hired secretaries, I always had my secretary hire my secretary because men are terrible at hiring secretaries. Don't worry, you don't have to work that hard. No, my secretary, no, you actually, when he's here until 8, you're here until 8. You can't get up and leave and say, oh, I have a, but interviewing, and these interviewing things, so that 80% of the time the interviewer is doing the talking, not the interviewee. So what do you look for? I mean, I think it's really hard to like have an interview with someone and kind of really know the person, And so I'll answer it kind of this way a little bit. Any one of you in this room are ready. I can decide I can hire you, not never meet you, because there's already a book on you, and you're writing that book as you speak, as I speak. That book's being written, and the book is. People you worked for before, your friends, your bosses, your peers, your subordinates, your teachers, do they work hard? Do you have passion? Do you get stuff done? Are you believable? Are you obsequious? Are you an ass kisser? Are you and it's pretty well known. You'd be shocked how common that stuff would be. And even your ethics, whether you're one of those people who just shaves the truth all the time or you're like Abe Lincoln, if you say something, you meant it. There's no air between what you said and what you meant and what you. And so one of the most important things we hire people is get that book. And I'm telling you a little bit about it because people are already getting that book. And one of the things you get now to do and for the rest of your life, you can write that book the way you want it. You can shed everything else and start a book fresh the way you want it. Which you can't do, when you've been out of school for 20 years. And so, a lot of people, they read all about Abe Lincoln, but they don't adopt his principles. They don't. So the one thing would be that book. The hardest part to tell, someone asked me about once about what's more important, IQ or EQ. You know what EQ is, right? And I answered the question, and I really thought about it. I think like all of you probably have enough IQ to run a company anywhere, and do fine. But it's the hardest skill is EQ. It's softer, but EQ is, do people trust you? Do you relate to people? Do you get stuff done? Are you fair? Is it, and you would wish EQ in your kids because that's what leads to a happy life. The social skills, the social abilities. We promoted a woman who was doing investor relations for us to be CFO of a whole commercial bank, now responsible for hundreds of people in a business that makes $1 billion a year after tax profit. And she's an A+, and we realized she had the brains before, but at this particular job, all of her other skills are shining. People want her in the meeting because they trust her. She gets stuff done. She's effective. She's fun to be with. No one would ever question why she's doing something. She knows she's doing it because it's good for the company and good for the clients. And so having said that, I would tell you I don't think it's the right question either because you guys get this all the time. It's always in the press. And they always convert things to binary. Are you trying to get revenues or cut costs? Are you trying to do this or do that? Are you trying to, and it's never binary. There's no binary. And this one is particularly not binary because I said, what about CQ, like character? What the hell difference does it make if the other two without character? What about PQ, passion, WQ, work ethic? And I can go on and on about the skills and talents that are embedded in a person that are far more important than all the other stuff. But if you don't have the other, if you don't have them, you're not going to be that successful. And so you got to look at all of those various things.
Good. Well, let's take some questions from the audience now. Anyone have one be first? Yes, please.
Hi, Mr. Diamond. Wendy Oppenheimer, second year at Fuqua. I'm also a graduate of Tufts University undergrad, so Tufts community is very proud of your success, so go Jumbos. My question has to do with the integration of JP Morgan and Bank One. I read in a recent Wall Street Journal article that you had said one of the major obstacles was dealing with the legacy issues related to the JP Morgan Chase merger. And I used to work at JP Morgan before coming to Fuqua and was there during the 2000 merger. And wondered if you could just elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that I should never be caught saying publicly, which I was making a joke. I made it several times, kind of a joke, but it's also accurate, which is when we were doing the Texas conversion, which cost us $500 million, 4 million hours of coding to consolidate the systems, I made the joke that Texas was acquired by JP Morgan in 1988. And that the hardest part of the merger so far is merging JP Morgan and Chase, not merging Bank One. But in reality, when they did that deal, the scars from the JP Morgan Chase deal are still evident in the company today. They're still they're being eliminated now, but there are politics and silos around it. Systems didn't get done, and it was a very painful time for people there. And a lot of people, we ended up in jobs they shouldn't have had. And so I think it is a serious thing to say that it was the harder part. The rest of the merger is going as well as any merger I've ever seen. It's over almost, basically, but it was the hard part. If you ask the people there, they're still suffering from the JP Morgan Chase merger, which was done in 2000.
Next question.
And
yes.
part of it is because they compromise. And look, it's easy to look back and say, I'm not criticizing. They compromise so many decisions that every compromise, is just leads to another decision, leads to another compromise, leads to another, and they just cascaded, and eventually you got to just eliminate that and just put the right people in the right jobs. And
Hey Jamie, Ted Moore, Director of Credit Suisse. You and I met, I think it's 97 or 98, and Jamie came to visit Fuqua with Citibank back then.
That's correct.
My question is, could you comment? I'm sorry.
Were you at Smith Barney at one point?
I was at Smith Barney.
Right, that's
and then
my
I
first
followed this Duke guy, Mr. Mack, over to Morgan Stanley.
Right.
And then I followed Mr. Mack to Credit Suisse.
You pissed me off when you left Smith Barney.
But
you're still at Credit Suisse.
And I pissed off Mr. Mack, moved back to Morgan Stanley. So. But my question to you is, I recognize that you do a tremendous compression of traditional margins, brokerage, et cetera, or investment banking. The flip side of that is globally with the dynamic global expansion, where do you see the new initiatives and the new margins coming from?
Yeah. Wherever I go, we have these business reviews, and people, they always start by saying, margins are being squeezed, margins are being squeezed. I'll give you all a piece of advice. That will be that way the rest of your life. You don't have to say it. Stop it. It doesn't matter. Margins will always be squeezed. That's what capitalism is, like squeezing the margin, like having competition. And so I always tell people, well, it's a given that it's going to be tougher next year than this year. Not just your margin, but the competition. And so I always assume, and I always build into it. And actually, if you go through our business reviews and even our budgets, that don't expect that you're going to get this next year. And then you got to figure a way to either protect the margin or generate more. Sometimes the answer is systems and not consolidate. Sometimes it's not the obvious type of thing that you have to do. But you also made a very other interesting point that the financial services world has been growing unbelievable over the last 25 years. So when I started working in 1982, Morgan Stanley had gone public like a year before or something, and its market cap was like $2 billion or $3 billion. And now its market cap is 60. And a lot of that was organically, there's a couple of mergers in there, but organically kind of growth. The world's going to globalize. Financial markets grow with net worth, with people's net worth, with homes, with growing countries, with emerging markets, with a whole set of new products. So we have this tremendous stream of growth, okay, with reduced margins, but you got to look at both. But I think the opportunities could be enormous. But look at the other side of financial services, and it's no different than Walmart and Kmart. You may not be a winner. You better be very careful about how you bear the risks, understand the risk. And so if you look at the financial services world, the spectacular blow-ups. Spectacular blow-ups. So I'm going to give you 5. Okay? Credit Suisse, twice, was bailed out by its parent. Shearson Lehman, bailed out by its parent. Shearson Lehman lost $1 billion, by the way, more than it earned in its whole history. And this was like 1990. Kidder Peabody is basically liquidated into Payne Weber. Drexel Burnham and Solomon Brothers, we kind of bailed out when we bought it. 5 major investment banks. Now here's the amazing thing about that, folks. That was in the greatest bull market of all time. That was with all the brains, all the money, all the arrogance, okay? And they went bankrupt anyway. Think about it. It will happen again. And it is amazing to me, and you see, but it's not just in Fed, it happens all these things. And so, like, I don't believe, you know, when a lot of people talk about we were hit by the perfect storm, you know, we had this terrorist act, we had this bubble, we had this war, who would have known? Listen, I've been like conscious since I was a kid, but I started reading the papers all the time, like in the early 1970s. Since 1970, we've had multiple wars, multiple terrorist attacks. Matter of fact, the World Trade Center was bombed twice. Okay, we've had multiple bursts, market bursts, 25% in 1987, the mini crash in '91. We've had 2 real estate crises. You know, Argentina surprised everyone a couple years ago by going bankrupt. It was the 3rd time it went bankrupt in that time period. We've had multiple oil crises, multiple gold crises. We've had Sumitomo. We've had Barings. We've had what happened in Japan. We've had the 3 AAA banks in Texas out of business. We had the savings and loan crisis. What are they talking about being so surprised? So like when you all go to work, the next 25 years, it holds the same. Don't be that surprised. And it's hard to somebody figure out where it's going to happen, but like big financial companies, any company, you've got to be prepared. Like you can't over leverage up, you can't pull your eggs in one basket. If you look at the mistakes that were made, they didn't have the right control. They had people in jobs that they didn't trust. And so all these things will separate the winners from the losers, and they have nothing to do with margins of the business. They just are fundamental flaws that companies allow to take place inside the company. And so when I look at people hear me talk about a fortress balance sheet and surviving the bad times, I'm not kidding. When we look at interest rate exposures, credit exposures, derivative exposures, operational exposures, I'm talking about our survival. I'm not worried about the interest rate. If people, it's funny what I'm about to say, but if the Fed moves interest rates 50 basis points, I don't care. It means absolutely nothing to us, our company. I mean, it's a funny, we'll probably lose money here and make money there, and we have to hedge stuff and move, but that isn't what's going to make us successful or not. And being prepared for a 500 basis point move, who is the person who picked the last inflection point? No one knows. No one ever picked a big inflection point. When I went to work, prime was at 21.5. Who thought LIBOR would go to 1? And I can go issue after issue. Oil was at 12. And so when I got to J.P. Morgan, oil, and you all look at VAR, value at risk, all the statistics behind how you try to measure risk. It's a measure of risk about volatility in markets, and it's not a bad single point measure, but statistics. They say about statistics, damn lies in statistics. Don't be fooled by them, because when I got there, the VAR on oil said there was only a 1 in a million chance that oil would go from 35 to it was like a 30 to 45 or 15. I said, no, we're building our model 70 to 10. Because it's one thing to say, okay, well, it went to 70 and we lost $500 million, but I don't want to say we lost $500 million and it went to 45. And there's just common sense about how much risk you're willing to bear in commodity markets.
Next question.
Yes.
My name is Lydia. I'm a second year student. I'm surprised that I haven't heard the word China come out of your mouth yet. And it seems that everyone in your position and also people running every other business seem to think that China is going to be the major determinant of the future of the world economy for the foreseeable future. A, what is JP Morgan doing in relation to China? And B, what do you think about that sentiment?
Okay, let me answer that a couple of different ways. First of all, JP Morgan could be very successful and do a great job for shareholders and never go to China. And so this obsession sometimes with, this thing. Now, if you ask me, is China going to, is the outcome, have you ever seen a country grow at 9 or 10% a year? It's almost never happened, folks. And, and I've been to China many times, and, they are very good. Like if I were you, they are training 300,000 engineers a year. It shocks me when we see the officials there, how much they know. Okay, they're making dramatic and bold changes all the time, at a pace that would blow your mind. They have a full set, and so I think they're doing great, and I think the likely outcomes will continue to do great. So now I'd say, yes, it is a great opportunity, and we do a lot of investment banking there and cash management, and we're trying to get a securities license, and we try to negotiate some of these deals. So I've been there several times meeting with folks trying to, some of these deals I think some people did are dumb. You're not going to see us do them, but we're working on something that could be very interesting if it pans out. And the other thing you should think about geopolitical type of stuff. It's not a given, and I think it's true for all geopolitics that, this world globalization, I think is the likely outcome, but, there are a lot of hiccups in it. And while it is a great thing for the world in terms of trade, economics, there are some negatives. The negatives are, immense dislocation in an isolated spot. They close a factory in Michigan and they blame it on India, or some. I mean, it was just a terrible, just not accurate. But like the biggest beneficiary from trade is who?
Consumers.
Huh? It's the United States. If you're in India or China, you can easily say, well, it's really nice that you don't want to outsource any more jobs to us because I think outsourcing jobs to them, they've outsourced a lot of jobs here. Are you aware of that? They buy our aircraft engines, they outsource it to us. They buy our software, hardware, cars, they buy our pharmaceuticals, they buy our financial services, and they can say, well, we've outsourced that to you because they can do a lot of that themselves too, right? And people have to be very careful about this. But, and geopolitics kind of has always gone, if you look at 100-year history now, it's always gone in these waves. And, it isn't always true that, it was a lot of globalization before World War I. It stopped dead in its tracks by World War I. And there are a lot of globalization in the Roman times, stopped dead in its tracks by the Crusades or whatever. And so there are a lot of things that took place so great opportunity. It's not clear to me that they have a lot to do. They've got a population, 800 million people not living in the coastal areas, which are doing very well. They've got to give jobs to 30 or 40 million people a year. They've had a history of enormous social unrest. So I would bet with them. I think they've got enormous challenges in front of them. And so even if we go there, it won't go there saying, well, they'll never have a bump in the road. They will, in fact, have a bump in the road. And like these other bumps. I just don't know what they're going to be. And we were one of the biggest investment banks in China. So we do an awful lot of work there. We do conferences there. We have research on it. And we are legally restricted from doing a lot of things. We can't trade certain local stuff. Okay, so one of these licenses we're trying to get will allow you to have a domestic capability to do research, underwrite, and trade domestic equities in domestic markets. We trade them in Hong Kong. So there are all these kind of rules and stuff that are taking place there.
I'm actually curious about India. We were just over in China and India, and actually in India it seems like people are saying, well, China, because of their one-child policy, will not have a lot of youth in 20 years or something, and yet India will, and we will take over the world at that point. So I'm curious, are you engaged in India very much? And do you have any comments? Now, we have also a lot of students from India,
Right.
actually. That's
so India, first of all, we're going to have 10,000 employees in India by the end of the year.
10,000.
And so if you go to JP Morgan India, there's a building there, and it's like a small investment bank. There's an equity trading floor, there's a debt trading floor, there are investment bankers, there are private bankers. We do a lot of trust, custody, cash, and stuff like that. We're building it very rapidly. We're probably one of the top investment banks in India. And I'm going to say that's hundreds of people, but I forgot the exact number. There's another 9,000, which could be in operating centers. So in Mumbai and Bangalore. And our Mumbai, if you go to Mumbai, or when you go off these main roads and stuff, but it's going to Silicon Valley. And think of it this way. So we had there 20 different jobs input there. And so some are call centers. Some are accounts receivable and accounting and general ledger. But we also do research there. We also do a lot of the investment banking presentations that go to clients here are done there. So it's actually going way up the curve. Engineers, MBAs, and we're going to start giving MBAs, the best ones over there, opportunities to come over here and vice versa. They are going to be formidable. And again, they're also graduating, I think, like 240,000 engineers a year compared to, by the way, the United States, 40,000. Now, they still have terrible problems there. So don't think it's not a no-brainer, and they've got their own issues, but they're equally very smart. But they've got one negative. They have perfected bureaucracy, and and they got that from the Brits, but they just turned it up one notch, and they know that. But
All right. More questions? We take a couple more questions here, maybe.
Don't be shy. You
Way
can, ask,
up here.
you can ask whatever you want. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Alex Albert. My question is, in your view, how has the experience and how has the experience of MBAs changed over the last 5 years? New MBA graduates that you're seeing in your business.
It's hard for me to actually know exactly. I think that MBAs and business schools are like everything else. They have gotten more competitive and higher quality, and they perfect their skills and capabilities. So, I think you've noticed that it is getting tougher. Like even when I watch my kids go to college, I think it's gotten tougher. And so that's probably the thing I've noticed the most. I think they're very serious. I'm not sure I was as serious as you guys when I was in business school.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, the global movement of
Far more global.
yeah,
Yeah.
far more.
I mean, I think they just started that when I was there, so we had a lot of foreign students when I was at business school, but it's probably double that, triple that today. And a lot more Indians, Pakistani, South Asian. So.
I saw actually our applications data for this year. We've got double as the number of applications from India versus last year, like 360 versus 180 at the same time. I'm not totally sure what all's going on, but it looks like MBAs are hot again as far as applications after a couple of weaker years, it seems like. That's true. Next question, up here, yes.
My name is Kevin Lowry. I was wondering how you deal with people that don't fit your culture in your organization, when it's appropriate to make an example out of someone when it's not.
I mean, like to fire them to set an example? I'm going to surprise you. You would rarely see me do something like that. And when people come to me and say, you got to make a change, you got to say, I think like hanging your head up high, to make an example of you. I'm also making an example to everybody else that I'm willing to embarrass people and make a point, and it becomes very personal. So if you did something wrong, we'll just simply ask you to leave. We're honest with our people. If they were asked, we might tell them why. In some cases, we're restricted from doing something like that. I think people skills are really hard. So when you talk about a culture of a company, we don't, like in JP Morgan Bank One and all this stuff, you never, this will surprise you a little bit, you probably never saw me talk about culture. And I'm going to say another surprising thing, nor do you hear me talk a lot about morale. In fact, I always start with these, so what do you think of the morale's not so great? And I always started by saying, morale, I don't give a damn about morale. and I'm being facetious, by the way. I do care. I think there is a terrible, it's almost like a great gambit of all time that if we focus on culture morale, it'll actually create a good culture morale. When a good culture comes from actually doing the things that are the culture, that people are honest, meetings take place, there are follow-up lists, that people know what they're expected of them, people feel it's a great place to work, they get feedback. I can set up a mentoring program and you get no good mentoring. But in a lot of companies, there's a lot of mentoring that takes place because it's part of the culture. So you want a great culture, but if you delegate culture and morale to HR, you will not have good cultural morale. You will have corporate programs that are meaningless and worthless and a waste of time and destroy morale and culture. And so like morale comes from people who they feel great because of the way they're treated, that they get responses, they're part of the company, they're treated with respect. Not because you have certain perks and benefits. And we all sit around and hold hands and talk about how warm and fuzzy life is, and so and deal with the people issues is the hardest. And so when you do have put these new companies together, my first reaction is always when people, we always have all these heritage. I say, look, you can say whatever you want about the job, about where this came from, why you're making this, but it has to end by, try to be polite, it has to end by, I think it's the best interest of the company. Not because that's what we did at Chase, that's what we did at Chemical, that's what we did at Bank One. I don't care what you did at Bank One. Bank One wasn't the repository of all brains at the company just because people work for me at Bank One or vice versa. And when people eventually they get it. The issue is, what can you do better, faster, quicker? Who should be in the room? It should be completely honest. It should be a complete open environment. Even a janitor, if they were in the room and heard us say something, and they said, no, your checking accounts stink, we should say, why? How do you use it? Why do you use it differently? As opposed to, and I'll give you some clues about culture, by the way. When you hear people say, and I'm sure this happened to some of you, I'm going to let you go to the meeting, but remember you're there to listen. Ah, bad culture. You should be able to say whatever you want. Okay? I wouldn't say that to anybody. And it's, and by the way, that happened one time to me. I give my immediate 360s. I said to the officer, I said, come over here. I pulled him into my office. I said, why did you say that? He said, well, I just didn't want him disrupting the meeting or her or whoever. I said, you don't do it again. Well, I just thought, I said, you don't get my point. Don't do it again. And, it's just a way of manipulating people, and people hate it. People want to they want to be able to call up on a phone and have their phone calls returned and say, this is why we're doing the thing we're doing. So, the whole morale culture thing is a very difficult kind of thing with a lot of misguided perceptions and how you get it done. And so you want a culture, like, I'll give you a clue about meritocracy. Okay, how many you all worked at companies? Raise your hands if you know great people at companies. Raise your hands if you knew some terrible people at the places you worked. And that's the issue right there. So you have these bosses going around talking about a meritocracy, yet we're promoting these people that if you actually went across the street in any company to the local bar and asked the people, they would give you a list of the terrible ones. And it would be very common. And yet we promote them. And you hear code. This is where the code is. Great guy, he's been around a long time. By that great guy, it's okay for me to say because I just recently entered this class, usually a middle-aged white guy. You want diversity? Stop having cronyism. You want meritocracy? And here's another one. And we did do this at J.P. Morgan. The operating committee, which is the 6 heads of the businesses and about 6 heads of staff people, when it came to comp time the first year, normally they did their own, and I said, no, we're going to sit through in a room, and we're going to go all day through the top 500 people. And they were, what? And I'll tell you why I did this in a second. And eventually I don't have to do it like that, but they said, they all call politics and they don't understand the business. These are all very senior people. And I organized it. There wasn't like investment bankers, because obviously the way they used to do it, so we had all the HR, all the finance, all the systems, all the this, so you can look at it across the board, all the what we call equivalent, the business managers. And they were afraid, and I said to them, and Bill Harrison said, are you sure you want to do this? I said, yeah. And the HR guy who's no longer there said, don't I get to pay my person? I mean, isn't it up to me? Like, I said, don't they? He said, don't they work for me? I said, no, they don't work for you. Who do they work for? Right, the company. And so if I have an HR person, who should I be asking about whether they're doing a good job or not? You. I mean, the other people in the company. Not me, what I think. Hell, they can smoke me to death sometimes, But if I said to you, well, what do you think? You said, Jamie, they're terrible. They don't respond. Their unit doesn't function. That's what I should be asking you. So when we did the comp day, I said to him, you say what you're going to say. Say it politely, as politely as you can. But most importantly, when you leave this room, you are not allowed to come see me. To all of them. You are not going to come see me and say, well, I know they said this, but they really do a special job for me. Argue it in the room. You all paid millions of dollars, cough it up, become adults, argue in the room. Now, we made a lot of changes in the comp. And what actually happened to do that is we bumped a lot of people up, not just down. And a lot of the bump ups are women, some minorities. Because now we're saying, wait a second, she's much better. And they're often people who don't pound their own chests. They're often the people that we all say, I say they're great for me, you say they're fabulous. They do all this stuff for me. When I ask them to recruit or train, they're there. They get stuff done. They're the ones who actually fix this problem, and we learn about our own people and then create that environment. And you also leave the room, so one of the people who didn't get a very big job said to me, they assumed they're going to get the job. They're from Bank One. Why? And I said, the reason was that your own partners actually do not feel like you always give them 100% of the truth. And I gave him 3 very specific examples. And so when it came up, so he knows it's not just me now. I agreed with that. So I think when you give advice, you should say, well, this is what people say. I said, no, I believe it too. But so you're honest with your people, and you will develop a culture by having a culture, not by talking about a culture. You have to have bad people leave. It is really hard, but you have to have bad people leave. And people always say the pain and the company and can you risk it and the board and the analyst. I'm honestly make those decisions and move on.
You know, hearing your comments on communication like that, it reminds me of Jack Welch, actually. He was here 6 months or a year ago and emphasized the importance of candor. And I wonder if you have any particular views on his management style and how yours might be different from his.
You know, I mean, I know Jack fairly well, and I agree with you, and I think the guy is one of the outstanding business leaders of all time. I've seen him in action. I was in the room. You know, we were negotiating to buy the remnants of Kidder from him. So, you know, it was me and him and Dennis Darren and Sandy, and exceptional business person, exceptional people skills, and he's absolutely right about candor and the disciplines and all the things like that. So, you know, anyone who's worked with Jack has learned a tremendous amount by watching him. And you know, he should have been on my list. I would put Warren Buffett on that list too, of people you can learn a lot from. So I'm sure.
Okay, there was a question top of the bottom here.
And
Sir,
she had one too.
or let's see, I'm sorry. Yes, this fellow,
You have one more?
please.
My question is just a simple one. I was interested in knowing what your opinion is of the recent acquisition by Bank of America of MBNA.
I think it was very logical, you know, for the same reason that they've got, you know, 50 or 60 million customers, and they sell an awful lot of credit cards, and they probably could see a lot of cross-marketing, cross-selling, and synergies and rewards. And certainly, we put two credit card companies together, like the cost saves by putting Bank One card and Chase card together, $600 million. And that's already been done. And that's without disrupting anything. You know, it took $600 million to do it, but so I think it's probably a good thing. I didn't really analyze deeply the price, the values, or all this stuff like that. So
What was the other question?
she had one too, and I guess
Okay.
one there.
Yes.
You indicated that you seem to understand there's a wealth of information kind of among the rank and file that would be useful to you. Have you come up with any methods to extract some of that information?
Yeah, you know, it gets harder, you know, the more senior you get. But first of all, I return every phone call and every email from everybody. Every email and every phone call from everybody. Okay, and unless the person's suing us, generally, and which happens quite a bit. And I respond to it. I don't just say no. I don't just say here's the company policy, but here it is. Here's why we're doing it. Here's what's taking place. I take the time to do it. You know, I have town halls, and I will often sit in a room. Of course, all parts of the company, and not, you know, just the senior people. And we talk about the company, benefits programs. They don't like this. They don't like the building. They don't like, and we talk about all the issues, and they get raised. I go to hundreds of cocktail parties, so I know a lot of people, and a lot of people. And when they trust you, they'll start to tell you, "Hey, Jamie, you got a little problem over here. You might want to look into." And very often, a person that I may call them back and say, "Here's why I think you're wrong," or "Thank you for the information." And sometimes I can't say anything for confidential reasons, or so you get out. You know, that's another lesson. Get on the road. And you know, honestly, it's a lesson I learn over and over and over and over. Get on the road. Go to a branch. Like, what do you do at a branch? Now, sometimes I go to these things, I feel stupid. Like, I couldn't operate. I can't do what the teller can do. You know, I can't do what this can do. And you know, and you can walk. And so I say to people, if you go to, like, here's a good road, here's a bad road trip. People go on they're on the road. What do you do? God, I got a great trip. Met people. It was really great. So what did you learn? We met people. Morale's going up. It was really great. Terrible manager. I'm simplifying this a little bit. A good manager would say, hey, I was in 6 regions. I have, you know, of the 4 people running the regions, I think 4 are very good. 1 has to go. 1 I just don't know yet. I'm going to do coaching. Here's the coaching I gave him. I'm going to go back in a week. Okay. By the way, I had a whole bunch of sessions on our products and services. We compared them locally to Fifth Third and Bank America, line by line, and here's where we came out. I had a whole bunch of client dinners, and you know, the clients gave me feedback on your ACH, your product, your price, and your issues. I've already directed them to the people who do that stuff. I'm going to get back to those clients. That's a good manager. And when you hang out with the people and you could just take people to lunch. Just take a whole bunch of people to lunch. You'd be shocked when you find out. So you have to do it. And going to China, you know, it's not, you know, you can sit here and strategize, but when you go to China, you know, like, you know, you go to China. Last time I was there, driving in, I think it was like 12:30. No, it's 10:30. And there are 2 things really struck me. I get in the car, and I'm driving out of the airport, 10:30 at night. The first thing that strikes me is they're doing construction everywhere, and it's a Sunday night. People working, and they're working, not like sitting around, like, you know, And I think they're getting ready for the Olympics, and the whole bunch. The second was the guy said the governor of the People's Bank of China wants to see you now, because he heard you were coming and we couldn't set up. So I had a 10 o'clock meeting, with the people, the governor of the People's Bank, and you realize things you're just not going to realize by not doing that stuff. So you got to get on the road. So I just came from a trip, and I came from Nashville. We had our top 1,500 salespeople there. And so.
Well, we should let you rest. We want to thank you for coming to Duke, and I hope you'll be cheering for the Blue Devils tomorrow night if you catch that basketball game.
I'm cheering and I'm going.
And you're going. All right. Let's hear it for Mr. Jamie Dimon.
Thank you very much.